Afternoon. Due to the governor's recent order, all members of the Community Investments Review Committee are participating virtually. For virtual meetings, committee members will be muted until asked to be heard. At that time, they will be recognized and will be unmuted. When there is a vote, it will be necessary to take a roll call. A committee member will be recognized and state their vote. Today's meeting is a public meeting. The meeting will also be live streamed on the city's YouTube channel, which can be accessed at www.cityofws.org/2682/video. The recording of today's meeting will be available by next Tuesday on the city's website.
Are we going to do roll call or wait until?
We can do, let's do the approval of minutes and we'll do the roll call simultaneously.
Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from the meeting on September the 10th? If so, can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Excuse me?
So moved.
Okay, we'll do the roll call.
Somebody needs to second. Okay.
I thought Ken did it. I'm sorry.
No, Ken, maybe.
Okay. All right. So I guess all in favor and to announce your presence. I'm going through the roll call. Claudette Bailey.
Here and I.
Kenneth Pettigrew.
Present and I.
Greg Byer stated his absence. Kanika Brown.
Present, I.
Dr. Josh Canzona.
Present, I.
Sam Hickerson.
Present, I.
Damon Davenport.
Present, I.
Frankie Gist. Dr. Militia Witt Glover.
Present, I.
London McKinney.
Present, I.
Debbie Hunter.
Present, I.
Francis Peralta. Rennie Pitt.
Present and I.
Gracia Santillan. Quamika Shavers.
Present and I.
Charlene Simmons.
She's at work.
Okay. Christy Robinson.
Present, I.
And Kiana Taylor. Okay. Madam Chair, I believe the minutes, that was unanimous.
Minutes are approved.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm up next on the agenda. And so what you'll see is a review and update of our current process. But I want to start out first by saying thank you to all of the committee members. We really appreciate your work up until this point. This is the last scheduled meeting. So what I wanted to do is just take a moment to stop and kind of reflect on your charge and the work that you've completed thus far. And then at the end of the presentation, I would like to present an option to go forward for your recommendation and then a potential phase 2 of the committee's work. So Meredith, if I can share my screen.
You should be all set.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I just threw it in a PowerPoint just to make it easier to kind of have the discussion. Not sure what you all are seeing at this point. But anyway, let's just review this and then hopefully we can have some meaningful discussion about where do we go from here. Just as a reminder that the committee's charge was to make recommendations to the mayor and city council on a $1 million equity package by October 1st of 2020. So I realize that that is a monumental task. I know we've heard from a few of you about maybe needing more time, but that's a lot. We realized to make those kind of recommendations with less than 3 months. But thank you all for submitting some ideas, and we'll talk about those in a minute. The recommendations needed to address social justice issues and anti-poverty initiatives. So the committee was appointed by the mayor and city council. Each council member was able to appoint 2 members to the committee. And then there were 2 at-large. And also the mayor was able to select the chair and the vice chair from the list of committee members. And so you see the list, and all wards were represented, and 2 at-large. So you were given some resources based on requests from the committee, just to have a slight guide on to how to start thinking about project proposals and the recommendations. And so Vice Chair Pettigrew gave you all a presentation. He did a great job doing an overview about the topics and defined social justice and poverty and what that means in this context. You also received recommendations from the Poverty Thought Force report, and that report was done a few years ago. The committee made several recommendations. You all got a copy of that and was able to kind of review that as a starting point to start thinking about recommendations that you would make. The committee asked if any of those recommendations were actually put into practice, and so really the response to that is out of that came the Partnership for Prosperity that the city supports, and through that there probably are some initiatives, but no direct new programs were developed based on the specific recommendations in that report. You also received a list of city-funded resources that we knew of that address social justice and poverty. So that included some of the nonprofits that we currently fund through our regular community agency allocation committee, as well as some of the city resources that we typically fund. So the process was that the committee decided to just submit project ideas. There was a Google form sent out, and so you all use the form to submit your ideas, potential projected budgets for some of the ideas. It ran the gamut to some very broad ideas to really very specific, where some committee members identified specific agencies that they wanted to execute the project. So there was a broad range. The projects were then put into project categories, mainly by theme and by subject area. And then the committee was sent just this past week a scorecard. And so committee members chose to weigh in on some of the projects and to give some feedback. The scorecard was sent out. So the results, just based on the committee members that filled out the scorecard, and I'll tell you, it was 11 of the members completed the scorecard. This gives you a result. I do want to say 2 projects voluntarily withdrew, and that was the Southeast Technology Project, as well as the Generational Urban Leaders. But among the remaining, I just put the two columns. I know we asked about 5 questions, and I took all of those into consideration, especially on the budget end. But you can see the percentage of members who agreed for funding. And then there was a question about meets the charge. And so that question was actually a range. And so if the score was between 3 to 5 or 3 or higher, I put yes. And so we can kind of quickly go through these. For broadband internet access, expansion, and training, 70% of the committee agreed that this project should be funded and that it met the charge. Under the category of historic preservation and education, for historical markers was 60%, triad cultural arts and museum was 55%. Under mentorship and neighborhood capacity building, you can see the breakdown. Internships and mentorship for minorities was 30%, Youth Violence Prevention Task Force 30%, Salvation Army Daycare was 60%, Southeast Ward Male Academy was 10%. And then we had grants for social justice and anti-poverty initiatives. I highlighted the leaders in bright yellow because almost everyone supported this particular project. So it's 90%. There might have been maybe one or two people that did not support it as a project. The inclusive part, we had about 20%. And then long-term anti-poverty and social justice strategies, that was 90%. So the three that are in yellow, you got the grants for social justice, anti-poverty, long-term anti-poverty, social justice strategies. Those were the leaders, followed by broadband internet access and expansion and training. So, so where do we go from here? The categories that are highlighted, I just want to point out that the long-term strategies, there are several things under that. And so the strategies obviously would include looking at long-term, what causes poverty and what are how do we address social justice? They also talked about potentially this would include a social justice coordinator of some sort, that the duties would then have to be defined. It could result in some more policy issues, a better use of resources. So this felt like more of a, let's think about it, let's have more conversations. Transportation, I think, fell under that as well. But what it doesn't have specific agencies per se. So I'm gonna come back to that point. The grants for social justice, that also did not identify specific agencies. So this also gives an opportunity for nonprofits to then apply for grants. Depends on the funding, how much funding we're gonna put in that category, but this does give an opportunity for external agencies. And then the broadband internet access, expansion, and training, the majority of that, if approved, would then go to our city's IS department. Our information services department would be the lead on that into exploring how to put internet in individual homes. I know there were some concerns from committee members about, are there already resources out there for this particular item? The subcommittee responded, as well as the IS director, in that the resources that are out there now were kind of based on the whole idea of virtual learning. And so the school system ensured that youth had access to the internet. They had some Wi-Fi through buses. We offer it at recreation centers, but there was a slight gap in having access in people's home. So that was that piece. The training portion of it, there will be an opportunity for nonprofits to apply for funding in that category to offer training, ongoing training for people who, once you get access, how do you use it, and making sure people know how to use the technology. I just wanted to mention a couple of those because in the proposal option, we've heard some feedback from citizens, from a couple of community members who said, well, the community didn't have an opportunity to throw their name in the hat. The other two categories that are listed are very specific and identify specific agencies to perform the potential task. And so what I would propose is, just from a staff proposal, and the committee can weigh in on it, is to honor the categories that the committee has come up with and potentially think about not selecting specific agencies at this point. They can be considered, but to also give nonprofits an opportunity who may be out there that can perform some of these social justice or anti-poverty initiatives to be able to apply for some of the funding. So category-wise, this is what this would look like. So what this would mean is that the committee would submit potentially 5 categories. You can make it 4, you can make it 6. This is just based on the top categories that were completed in the survey. These were the top 5. Dollar amounts, you all can discuss how you want to fund each of these categories. I only just put 200,000 beside each because that totals up to $1 million. I will say that the initial project proposals totaled up to almost $2 million. It was around 1.8 million. And so we only have $1 million to allocate funding. And so if we look at this being kind of the end of phase 1, today we would submit a recommendation to the mayor and city council that allocates funding by category that totals up to $1 million. And so these top 2 were the top of interest just based on the survey. You can add more money, which means you have to decrease it from another area. And so we can discuss what that would mean and how you want to potentially allocate this funding by category. Then we would move into a phase 2. So today, if you decide to use the categories and put dollar amounts beside that, it totals up to $1 million, that will end kind of the phase 1 of your work. Phase 2 then would be, it'll go to council and they will approve the categories, funding categories. Then we would create requests for proposals. So we would really advertise that there is funding available in specific categories that people can apply for, primarily for social justice, anti-poverty initiatives, obviously. The applications would be reviewed and scored, and we can discuss who would be reviewing them and scoring them, but that will be a part of the phase 2 process. And then those recommendations with specific projects. So it can be some of the existing ones, it can be some of the news, but everyone will have an even playing field on applying for these resources. Council would then approve that list, and then funding would then be allocated through contracts with those contractual agreements. And then where the committee would come back in is that staff would create a final report on all of the agencies who's been funded, who the contracts are with, and then potentially quarterly or annual update on the progress of the funding. So that is the proposal. And so this, at this point, the committee can weigh in, and if you are feeling that at least a proposal by category, I would love to hear about how we would, what categories it would be, if this is these, or if you want to change it up or change up the dollar amounts.
Ms. Tony, this is London.
Rennie Pitt. Can you remind us, and I was looking through the minutes, of those 5 categories, what was the dollar amount of each of those proposals?
Okay. Great question. Okay. So under the information technology access, we had this committee combines two project ideas. It was the broadband internet access and the tutors and mainly we merged it to be training. The last proposed amount was $400,000. In the feedback, several people thought it should be funded at that level. A few people thought if we fund it to give it half of that amount. One person actually requested to increase the amount to $500,000. So it was a range on the dollar amount for that proposal. For the heritage preservation and education, that's the historical markers. That was $40,000. That was rounded up to $40,000.
But was that one of the 5 categories that you just mentioned, though? That's
yes.
what I was trying.
Did you all see my screen?
I can't right now. I see you, but I don't see the screen.
Oh, we could see it earlier. We just
Yeah, we saw it earlier, and that's
Can
what.
you see it now? Oh, okay, let me see. What about now? No.
No.
Yeah, it's your screen showing now the review and next steps, the title slide.
Yeah.
It's showing now.
But what I was seeing was the screen that you put up, Patrice, that had the 5 categories. There it is. Whoa, it just went away.
It's still there. It's still there, Mr. Pierre.
Okay, I see it. Okay, so
okay, right. So this first category, grants for social justice,
right.
And anti-poverty initiatives. So this one was combined with addressing root causes for sustainable change. So that dollar amount was $30,000 initially, and that would have potentially looked at a consultant to come in and do a little bit more work and research on sustainable solutions. Then there was a project for addressing food insecurities in the East Winston area. That amount was $250,000, and then the social justice coordinator was $65,000. So collectively, it was over $300,000, about $340,000 that you saw, that you rated on the scorecard. But each of those were very specific things. And so potentially, if we looked at more of a consultant to look at sustainable change, yeah, that was only around $30,000, and then food insecurities of some sort was a $250,000. So we're talking about $280,000 is the request if you take out the social justice coordinator for that item. The grants was I believe $300,000 total. That combined resources and support for ex-offenders submitted by Sam Hickerson. And then we had something called seed grants for social justice, anti-poverty. We combined that into one. And so that is now $200,000. Broadband internet access, I think I've already mentioned, that was $400,000 initially. Heritage preservation was $250,000 plus $4,000 for the historic markers program. And then the mentorship category, that was significant because that's the one that had numerous projects underneath it that were really specific to specific programs. And don't forget, there was another category called transportation and accessibility initially. On the scorecard, you saw the inclusive part, which was $500,000. And then the public transportation improvements, we moved into the long-term strategies category to have further discussions on how to improve transportation through that. So the inclusive part kind of stands alone in terms of a category. Now that can be merged into another group, or it's up to the committee but you can kind of see what the results are here.
Patrice, this is Debbie Hunter. May I ask a question?
Yes.
On the original results screen that you showed with all of the detail of the percentages and whether or not, yes, this one, there are a couple that did not meet the charge. Have those been pulled out of the categories? I'm assuming if they didn't meet the charge, they would not be funded.
Well, thank you, Debbie. That's an excellent question. The committee would need to decide that. I just wanted to show the results. The scorecard was designed so that people could weigh in safely and freely. We weren't going to identify any specific people, just to give you a sense of the collective feeling of the committee. So the committee definitely can determine which projects that if collectively the committee didn't think it met the charge, it can definitely be removed, or I would leave that up to the to the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Tony, I have a question. This is London. So I just heard you say that you all collectively put these together. When you go back to the numbers in the 5 different groups in phase 1, now, was that something that you, when you say that we, does that mean that in a conversation that you had with maybe the chair and vice chair to group these out in this way? As I thought we would have come back after we did the scorecards and kind of talked about the results before determining where things would go.
No, that is totally up to you, London, in terms of putting it where they need to go. This is just a list based on what's been submitted, and these are the last actual agencies or projects that are remaining that were actually scored. So you all can decide exactly where you want, in terms of categories and what categories you want. The broadband internet access and expansion that came out of a subcommittee, they determined to merge those. That is the title. Grants for social justice, anti-poverty initiatives, that is what it is. Long-term anti-poverty social justice strategies, that was the initial title. The subcommittee merged a few things under that, as I just explained, but that was definitely the title that was created.
So that was actually submitted after we had our group sessions, correct? Not prior to?
They were not, no. Broadband internet access and expansion was the actual project name that was submitted. The second title that was actually submitted was tutoring and training, tutors and training centers for virtual learning and support. When they met in their subcommittees, they decided to merge those 2 concepts.
Right, so that came after we had group sessions.
Right.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know, because I think at our last meeting on the 10th, there was some groups that were starting to merge together.
That's right.
But before we could, get that information back, I think this next process had already started. So I wasn't aware of the merging and the new creations of names.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was just those 3. And I do recall that the mentorship category stated they needed more time. And so I know there were more discussions that needed to happen. But right now, that's why they're left separate. They're under that category, but they are still individual programs.
So they were given extra time after our meeting on September the 10th, correct?
No. This came out of September 10th.
After September 10th. I know we met and we had those group sessions. And I do recall when we came back together as one, myself as well as Christy requested more time for this committee to talk and actually talk through some of these things. Because I see now, just like I'll acknowledge the historical marker program. I thought we kind of vetted that out a little bit there, but now it almost seems like that may also go into part of these 5 groups that have already been identified. But now we're being told that, you know, it's up to us to kind of vet these things out now. I just want a little more clarity as far as the directives that we should be doing as a group, because it just seems like we keep jumping from different things and it just sometimes does not seem clear.
Okay. Well, it's up to the committee. This is the results as it is right now. What I was proposing is that there are some clear categories. And so, yes, while historical markers, 60% of the committee said that this is something they would agree to fund. Triad Cultural Arts and Museum, 55%, a little more than half of the committee agreed to fund it. It is up to the committee whether you want to fund these specific items under this kind of broad category and leave them separate, or send a recommendation to council that is just a category, and then there will be a phase 2 to talk it out further. So, I mean, I know under the mentorship and neighborhood capacity building category, there was more time requested to think this through. Under this proposal here, you would be recommending funding by category without the specific agencies. So that's where the more time would come in, and there will be time for other nonprofits to apply for the resources as well.
So I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I ask that this committee, that we as committee members start having a discussion about it? Because we sometimes in these meetings, we don't talk about it enough to even come to a decision about one thing. It's almost like we're pretty much, it's suggested to us and then we see all this information.
And I kind of wanted to jump on Ms. McKinney's, piggyback on what she's saying. It seems in some ways that the results from the survey that we all from the committee had a chance to weigh into reflect that, there's, I'm looking at the mentorship and neighborhood capacity building. It seems like as a committee that those were a lower percentage for agreement to fund by the committee. But when in phase 1 of recommendation, it looks as though they're all weighed to the same amount, which to me seems counterintuitive to what our committee voiced. And so I think some extra discussion surrounding that.
Yeah, I have the same.
Yes.
I have the same
Let me
question.
let me weigh in just on what Christy said. Thank you. And so what I was saying here is that I did not want to rank it. I wanted you all to look at the results here and then give me feedback on where you want to add most of the resources. As I stated before, we only have $1 million. So you could very well say, okay, grants for social justice, I want that to be 300,000. But guess what? We need to take 100,000 now from something else. I mean, do you take it from the mentorship category? At the end of the day, it needs to balance to $1 million. So that's where I would want some feedback from the committee.
This is Debbie Hunter. I think to Christy's point, I have a similar issue, and maybe I don't understand the process, but if the committee voted or if the committee scored these projects and we have these 5 categories, it seemed to me I think what I saw was 2 to 3 of these categories really bubbled up to the top on the scoring results. So I'm not sure why we would still be considering all 5 categories, especially the ones that scored quite low, because to me that seems to dilute the amount of funding that we can give to those things that really seem to be deemed critical by the committee, as opposed to just spreading it among all 5. So I guess I'm a little bit lost. I don't understand why we scored if we're still going to consider all 5 categories.
Teresa, I thought the whole idea of the scoring was for the committee to prioritize these projects. And I think the scoring does in fact give you that prioritization. And so when you look at the grants for social justice, long-term anti-poverty, broadband internet, you clearly have 3 projects that have bubbled up to the top. And so these others down here that were scored less, it seems to me if we have a limited amount of money, we ought not to be diluting our priorities among the projects that did not get committee support.
Okay, those are absolutely, this was just an example of, how you could create categories and put funding in those categories. This wasn't me telling you, and that's why I did not personally rank it, because I definitely could have based on the scores. But I would suggest that somebody make a recommendation. If your recommendation is to only fund the top 3, somebody needs to make that suggestion, and it needs to be a vote.
I would like, this is Kwamika Shavers. I'm sorry, London.
That's
This
okay.
is Kwamika Shavers. I would like to make a motion that we
Reset.
that we reset, because it appears that, it says propose, so it was just an example, so I would like to make a motion that we divide the money among the 3 proposals that have the most percentage of support. The other question, so yeah, that's what I would like to propose, and I hope that's okay with the committee.
I have a question too, Ms. Tony. I think everybody should get something. Some of the ones that's on here, for instance, like Salvation Army. I think Salvation Army do a wonderful job. They have $1 billion endowment. They will continue on getting millions of dollars. So I think even if they scored the highest and they got to like the 30%, I believe everyone should get something, especially when we deal with minority communities. I don't think it all should go to the first part. That's an issue for me. I think we may need to start this process back over, because it wasn't clear. London and I has been talking about this. I mean, this is an issue. This is a serious issue.
But then
I decide how you all want to decide on this, and just move forward on that.
I apologize. So this is London, and I am going to I think we all kind of going towards the same direction. I would like to ask that we just reset and start over again. I'd like to make a motion to this committee for us to reset and start over again.
Okay.
Well, wait a minute, we've already got a motion on the floor.
Yeah, there was another motion before that one. So let's go in order.
I'm sorry, I'm not totally clear what the.
I'm sorry, this is Kwamika Shavers. I would like to revise that motion, being that, did everyone get a chance to vote? I mean, did everyone submit their vote?
Okay, so the results do not include, everyone had opportunities to submit a vote. Everybody did not choose to weigh in on it.
Okay.
But
so,
more than half of the committee did.
But more than half, but what about maybe, did we get at least 80% of the committee voting?
It was probably around 60%.
60%. Okay, I would like to withdraw my motion, please.
Okay.
Well, this is Debbie. My concern is that if everybody had an equal opportunity to vote and chose not to, that just seems like a missed opportunity to me. And I don't think we should penalize those who did vote and came up with these results.
Can I just say something really quick? I think it should be all 5 categories, regardless of whether we, how we distribute that money, we can talk about. But if you look at the percentages, it's not like the percentages, if only 60% of the individuals are part of this committee voted, it's not like the percentages are so far apart. If you look at the percentages for the historical markers program, you had 60%. For broadband internet, you're only at 70%. We only have 2 that are at 90%. So even in the mentorship and the neighborhood capacity building, we're at a 60%, at least with this Salvation Army all day care. So I think around the board, we have support in each area, especially when we only have 60% individuals that have gave their results on that scorecard. So I believe we should still use all 5 categories. whether that is giving more money to some and less money to others, I completely understand that fact. But I just think it would be more, it would be better for the community if we funded all of the categories.
So Draymond, I have a question for you. If we do that and they go to phase 2 and we allow for other nonprofits or even for-profits to come in, how does that factor into what we have here if we do all 5? And that's coming from the community who wants to be involved, not just from us as individuals making our suggestions.
Yeah, that's another reason why I would agree for it to be all 5. So the community would have more input into the different areas as well. I understand it's hard deciding how we divvy up that money, but I just feel as though all 5 categories should be represented, especially since if we are going to go with the proposed phase 2 as well, where we look at organizations, plans, nonprofits, and others for these different areas, I think it would be well worth the time to have 5 areas, because the plans that nonprofits and some community members could come up with, we all could feel were really spectacular in these different categories. So I feel as though we should stick to 5.
Is that your motion? Is that a motion?
I mean, yeah, I'll put it. I can do that. I propose we stick with all 5 categories.
But then we still need to do the first one, though. You still need to do mine, Kwamika Wax, for the reset. I made a motion that we reset.
London,
What are we resetting, to be able to vote again, or I'm sorry, what are we resetting?
I'm confused about the reset.
I would love to hear more about that too, London.
If we do a reset, we start over from the beginning and get more directives on, and I would say this phase number 1, which makes better sense. That way we get more information. We have a guideline as to how we're going to make this happen in phase 1. If we're going to be bringing in people from nonprofit to be a part of it, then we have a structure we have a place where we can start reviewing their applications when they come in to be able to identify what areas they go in. Right now, if they come in, we have nothing to offer them. We have nowhere to tell them how much money they would be afforded to get, but at least this allows us to come together as a committee and look at other ideas to go into these 5 areas versus what we've had thus far.
It's part of the, just to clarify something that Patrice said, part of the problem with some of the programs that were suggested is that when it goes to the city, they all have to bid for those anyway. So to suggest a certain organization when they have to bid and open it up to everyone, Patrice, would you expand on that?
Yes, thank you, Christy. Right now, so I guess the proposal would be either 5, 3, 4, it doesn't matter how many categories. You would determine those categories, and we would say, okay, we have 300,000 for grants for social justice, anti-poverty initiatives. There will be an RFP, and nonprofits could apply for those funds. That particular category, there was no suggested agency, so this would be totally open to any agency that want to apply and felt like they fit one of those 2 areas. One of the other things, we've got mentorship and neighborhood capacity building. Ultimately, that was put on here because members thought that was it met the charge. It could be lumped under the same grants for social justice, anti-poverty initiatives, and that could widen that pot. So then you would be saying, okay, 400,000 and just open it up to nonprofits. The other categories are so much more specific. And so if you kept those categories, they would probably have to stay as is. And then if anyone wanted to bid on those or submit an application for those, they could it would be a very specific description under those. I think you already have provided a great detail of information to justify those categories. So we have some project descriptions and people would apply based on that.
Ms. Tony, could you explain why it's just for nonprofits and not for-profit organizations? What's the difference between the two?
Yeah, we I guess potentially, I just need to verify, but typically we issue resources, public resources in this capacity to nonprofits for public good of some sort. Now, if there is a specific need under one of these categories, for example, under the mentorship, and there is a for-profit, it just has to be done in a different format. It will be a bid process. And so you would have to make sure that all for-profit organizations that would potentially meet that criteria would be aware of the opportunity to bid on those funds. And then when those bids come in, a lot of times we look at the lowest bidder or who can do the most for the least amount, because these are public resources. And so it's just a different process, but right now it's probably possible.
Okay, because that was just one of the things that I was afraid of, is that there would be some for-profit organizations out there that may question why that opportunity wasn't provided to them as well, especially if they're doing the work of social justice or anti-poverty in the community.
Yes, we would just need to make sure that every for-profit would be aware of the opportunity and be able to bid on it if they choose.
I was contacted by a young lady from the community who informed me that she was looking for funding for for her program that does educational resourcing. And she has gone to the Winston-Salem Foundation, and they informed her about this money. And so I could not tell her too much of anything because I wasn't aware that there was an application process. If there is, could you explain that to us and where that could be found?
There is no application process for this process, right, as is. That was the proposal for phase 2. So once and if you all decide to vote on categories and decide what the categories are and how much money will be in each category, the next step of that would then be to create a request for proposals, an RFP that we would publish and put out to the community so that they are aware of the funding opportunities, and then they can apply. So that would be if the committee wants to vote on these categories and what categories you definitely want to keep. So we've heard some want to do the top 3 that were suggested from input from the committee, those who chose to give input and weigh in. So the top 3 on this list here is in order, pretty much. So grants for social justice and long-term anti-poverty initiatives, they tied both at 90% of all those who completed the survey. Wanted those funded and pretty much funded at the level that they requested. So the other 3, well, the third one was also extremely high on the list at 70%, and then the other 2 fell under that. So these are the top 5, but if you want to either go with the top 3, do you want to go with the top 5? That is where the committee needs to decide, do you want to combine 2 of these? As I mentioned, you could combine the neighborhood and the mentorship program with the grants, because at the end of the day, it'll be grant opportunities for social justice, anti-poverty. I think we just pulled that out because what people suggested, but that could be rolled up into that one category.
Patrice? Oh, go ahead, London, and I'll go after you.
It's Q, Ms. Robinson, but I would just like to make a motion that, because I'm sorry, I got confused from the other PowerPoint, so I was looking at it incorrectly and I was looking at it from my phone, so please forgive me. Okay. So I would like to amend my original motion that we accept all 5 proposed items, recommended items, especially being that the ones that were the top 3 will be funded almost fully or almost fully. So I would like to make a motion that we accept all 5, whether you take the mentorship and stick it in with grants or not, but that we accept all 5 of the proposed items on the PowerPoint that I can see right now.
Okay, so can I jump in here? Can I jump in here? We cannot take a second to that motion because there is still a motion on the floor and your original motion has been withdrawn. So we have to handle the motion that's on the floor, and then you have to make a new motion based on what you just said in order for us to actually take action on it.
Okay, I'm sorry. We were supposed to vote on another motion?
Yeah,
yes,
the one
there's
that I
still a
presented
motion on the
first.
floor about the idea of the reset. That motion is still on the floor and it has not received a second.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I have a question about that. Do we have to, as far as the budgeting, do we have to allocate the funding up to $1 million? As from the very beginning, we were told that none, some, or all of our recommendations would be made. Would it make more sense to rank order our proposals instead of, and maybe give suggested funding that might not total up to $1 million? I'm just curious because the city council after this has even more time to weigh in and change and do what they will to these current proposals. Can you clarify that for me, please?
Well, the charge is to present a $1 million, it's called an equity package in the resolution to the mayor and city council. So that is the charge. That's a great question, Christy. I think initially we were open to just everybody submit what you wanted to. And as I said, that totaled up to almost $2 million. But then we just need to narrow it down to say, for $1 million, this is how we would recommend these funds be spent. So it really should total to $1 million.
Okay, thank you. And Kenneth, would you please explain the current motion on the floor? I'm not completely clear what we're voting on.
So at present, there is still a motion on the floor for a committee reset, which has not yet received a second. And we entered into discussion before it received a second. So technically we're out of parliamentary order anyway. So the motion has not yet received a second. So it would need to receive a second in order to receive a vote. And then the motion that Q would like to make could then be made after we take a formal vote on the motion that's currently on the floor.
Right, if there is a second. So does someone want to second the initial motion? If there's no second, then the motion dies.
I'm just not entirely sure what the motion was, which is hard for, I think, why I'm not clear on if it, for the second.
Start all over, Christy.
I'm in favor of more dialogue on this, but I'm not exactly clear what a reset would entail, and that's what the motion is, correct?
Correct.
This would, I'm sorry, Chris, this is London. If we did a reset, it would allow us to start back over and we can have additional dialogue.
When you say start over, do you mean resubmit proposals?
I'm sorry, Debbie, I was trying to unmute.
That's okay.
Yes, I would say, yes, to resubmit proposals that actually address exactly what we were charged to do, which was to address anti-poverty and social justice issues in this community. And with a better understanding exactly who all are we supposed to be helping with this social justice and anti-poverty. We were given that poverty thought force report, and I don't think that we took any of the suggestions from that. We didn't even discuss that. But when I think about it, once this goes out into the public, you know, how will they look at us as committee members? Did we think of them when we came up with these proposals? What about the nonprofit organizations that are actually doing this work? Did we give them that opportunity to even, you know, have a weigh in on being a part of this project? And when it comes back, they're not going to look at the city council. They're going to look at each individual that's on this committee as to, did we do the charge that was given to us? And I honestly don't feel like we have done that based on some of the information that we've given, that we have been given, and especially for us to be at this last day and we're still confused about what we're supposed to be doing.
My address to the chair would be, since we've taken as much time as we have to do what we have done, and there is a deadline that has been placed before us, do we have enough time to go back through these procedures all again?
Well, the request was made on September the 10th, twice, to seek additional time. That feedback has never come back to this committee as to whether we did get approval for that. Twice it has been, you know, requested. And I think that would have helped us a great deal if we could have had that additional time.
Let me jump in and just address a couple of things. I have, last week, I submitted an update to the mayor and city council in reference to the requests from the committee for additional time. Right now, there will be an update given to council. Now it's November, it was October. So there will be a committee of the whole, and they will hear recommendations from this committee. What's been proposed today is, once again, you can submit your categories. You know, I would not, well, you know, the committee has done quite a bit of work up to this point. The committee has created categories. Those categories, and once you determine the funding for those categories, can be submitted to city council. If there's additional time given, there would be a phase 2, which, if this committee so chooses, could participate in a second phase of the process, which obviously would be more time to, number one, allow the community to submit applications in those funding categories to be reviewed, and then come up with your final specific recommendations on the actual agencies that you recommend to receive that funding.
So, Ms. Tony, my question now is, what happens if this is presented to City Council and is rejected and they tell us to restart?
It's not likely they'll tell you to restart. They may suggest a different category or some other funding. I have no idea what they're going to suggest. They may suggest some of it, but it's likely that the categories are broad enough. If they accept that, then we could just move straight to phase 2.
Okay. So, Sam, if you don't mind, can you tell me, out of these 5 categories, which one did you suggest? Because I'm just puzzled by the fact that we got these 5 categories that none of us truly discussed as a committee, but this is what we're putting forth. And then we're still unsure as to which ones to keep. Do we keep 4? Do we keep 5? Again, it's just, our directives have not been clear enough for us as a committee to say, yes, we put in this much conversation to agree that this is what we want. Again, everything always seems suggestive and not that it comes from this committee.
Yeah, but let me just correct you on that, London. As I stated before, these titles came directly from the committee. So, I mean, you can twist it if you want to, but the committee directly gave the title grants. It was seed grants for social justice and anti-poverty initiatives. That came from Dr. Josh Canzona. That was a specific title and project proposal. Long-term anti-poverty social justice strategies. Dr. Militia Witt-Glover created that suggestion. There were a couple of things that were rolled up into that category. There was a subcommittee with Kenneth Pettigrew, Dr. Militia Witt-Glover, and they discussed combining some of the projects.
Yeah, excuse me.
Broadband, no, let me just finish this because this has been misstated 3 times. Broadband internet access expansion was an exact idea that came from Christy, Debbie, Rennie Pitt, and Greg Beyer. They came up with the title, the concept, and merged 2 projects into one. They were discussed in a subcommittee, and this is the result of what they came out with. This was not something that I made up or the chair, vice chair, or anybody else. So let's just be clear about that.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to our conversation between myself, you, and Chair Bailey. When I got the survey, one of the questions that I asked you after going through that survey and how some of the projects that were presented had very little detail. And I told you, I said, well, I was kind of concerned by the last one, which you acknowledged yourself with when Ms. Bailey on the phone with us, that this is one that you wrote up and this is the information that you put in. Now,
No, I did not write it up. I did not write it up. I combined the 3 ideas from the subcommittee. I did not change the details of the descriptions. What I wrote at the bottom was how each of those items were funded, because I combined the 3. So you asked me, why was there not a breakdown? And Ms. Bailey, you can jump in, of why did I add the breakdown of what was in there? And I said, it's because I combined 3 of the projects, and that was based on what they said for their subcommittee. So I just wanted it to be clear that they weren't asking for $340,000, that a portion of it was for a social justice coordinator, a portion of it was for long-term strategies, a portion of it was for food insecurities, to develop a plan for East Winston. And so since they combined their 3 projects when they met in their subcommittee, I just wanted to detail the three breakdowns for that budget.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you for saying that. But
That's
again,
correct.
what I asked of you, even in that, what I explained to you is that when I'm looking through the survey, I'm looking at seeing small caption. Not everybody had the detailed information like the very last one, which I felt was unfair, being that we were expecting the next day to get information on proposing a budget, because you all did request that we present a budget. That was requested on the 10th. We never got that information. The next thing I know is here we got that we got the scorecards. And when I expressed my concern that not every program that was presented had detailed information, even after we had just did those project group meetings, we should have all been allowed to present the same amount of information. That was not done. And that part I felt was unfair. So I'm just saying that it comes from not getting enough information. I think that everyone would have put down their budgets. They would have presented the same amount of information, except for what was taken, what I felt like was taken from our initiative report to you when we were talking about projects. That was unfair, being that some of us had even brought in consulting groups to even help us with our projects.
Okay, I will take that, but everybody did have an opportunity to submit the information, but that's fine. I think we should move on. If London, you want to make finish your motion and see if there is a second about resetting. If that's what the committee would like to do, that's fine. If not, we can move on to the second motion I think Ms. Shavers had.
Well, my motion still stands to ask for this group to reset and start over with this process. In fear that, this goes to council, we possibly could be rejected and have to come back to this point again. Because again, it does not address what we were given in the beginning, was to address social justice and anti-poverty for this community. Because this committee is us. Everybody that's on here today is your name that will appear in the paper if there's any backlash from it. And if you're good with what we have here, then in no second motion, then I'll withdraw.
I'm with you, Ms. London. I motion that. Second. Kanika Brown.
Okay, I'll have to do a roll call vote on that. So there's a motion, there's a second. If you're in favor of starting over as a reset, let it be known by saying aye as I call your name.
Patrice, is it possible for us to, at least for me to make a comment and maybe some others to have some discussion on this before we do the roll call?
Yes.
I want to make sure I understand what's happening and perhaps this will be helpful. The first thing I heard is that these categories might not emerge from some of the ideas that were presented. Now, it seems to me, being as impartial as I can be, I think these categories did indeed emerge from the ideas that were presented. So I want to say that again. The second thing is, if I'm understanding correctly, you're suggesting, you and the staff and some others, a phase 2 where using these categories, there would be a chance for some more specific proposals fitting into these categories. So if someone feels that they've missed an opportunity to have a particular idea heard, for a particular idea, a very specific one, to have a chance, that opportunity would not be missed because there would be a phase 2 where they could bring that specific organization or idea back to the table again. Now that's
correct.
That's correct, okay. So no need for a reset to get that opportunity. That opportunity would happen nevertheless. Okay.
That's right.
So perhaps I will pause there. Maybe I'll say one more thing. It might be helpful to remember that the city has a citizen committee, the Community Agency Allocation Committee, which has a complex process for scoring grant proposals. So that committee and that process could be used in one of two ways. You could send some of this money to that committee, and they would vet nonprofits using specific categories and be able to have a thorough process of making decisions in our stead. Or you could take this committee and let them borrow aspects of that process that already exists as part of phase 2. So this committee, using a complex scoring process, would be able to weigh specific proposals and make those kinds of decisions. All of these, I think, are live possibilities that don't require us starting over from scratch. And so for that reason, I would be against a full reset.
I would just like
to say, I have a question for London. London, this is Claudette Bailey.
Yes, ma'am.
You just want to reset, throw everything out and come back to the table with new ideas, or does any of these appeal to you?
I'm not saying to throw out their programs, because we have identified that there are programs, or there have been suggestions that do meet the social justice and anti-poverty initiative. And I think that is what our charge was from the beginning, was to use these funds for that purpose and for us to focus on that. If we need to get more data, you know, request for more data. If we need to get more insight, we just need that. But to go in the way that we're going, I just think that there's going to be some backlash. And are we as committee members ready for that?
Well, can I suggest that we, if you need more time with this and you're comfortable with some of the stuff that we have on there, even if you go to the phase 2, then we can hash that out then. All right? You agree?
Repeat that again, I'm sorry. Repeat that again.
I was just saying, even with the groups that we have now, and if we need to go further and hash this out, we can do that in the phase 2.
That is fine. I mean, that is fine if that's what the group wants to do. That's fine. But I'm going to still stand on, you know, wishing to reset this committee.
So what would reset entail?
That is for us to all come back together. One of the things that has been expressed quite a bit amongst this group is that we really have not come together as a committee to talk with one another. I would have loved to have worked on my initiative or my project suggestion with Dr. Whit Glover to see how we could have combined. Even the other group that we had started coordinating our efforts together from the mentorship group, I would love to see how we could have done more of that, but even to hear more about some of the other groups, but we didn't have those time. That time was not provided to us to do so. I think Christy, you know, suggested several times herself that she wanted to do more group sessions to get to know what everybody was wanting to present. And then when we think about it, truly, did we have an opportunity to go and talk to our community to see what it is that they want? I mean, we're dealing with COVID. That's the reason we're on Zoom, but we didn't have that opportunity. But I would love to know what other organizations are out there that we could have utilized versus us as a committee coming up with our own ideas and projects.
This is Kwamika Shavers talking. I would like to say, as a person who has still been active in the community during the midst of the pandemic, I have a very close relationship with communities who are in need of this money. And there are some things on the list that are not going to be necessarily beneficial for the community. And I can say that as well. And I know that's because certain people have not been in these communities, so they have no idea what the true need of this community is. So that part I get. However, when I was contacted by city councilmen to be on this committee, I began to do my research with the prior knowledge that I have, and also reach out to people who I know more about how this money could be best used as well, to figure out a comprehensive plan to present. So it's, you know, I mean, I understand what you're saying about more time, but do we have it? Do we necessarily have the time?
When will the money be issued out? I guess that would be the question. I mean, it's after we come up with a plan to submit to council and council agree on it. And again, what if they send it back? Then we're back to square one, right?
We won't be back to square one. We want to honor the work that the committee has already put in place. I'm certain council will honor that. If they have their own ideas or suggestions, they obviously are free to weigh in on that as well. So I wouldn't worry about that so much. And once again, we've requested additional time. So when this is presented to council, you will have met kind of the phase 1 of your charge, which is providing recommendations by category for funding these specific categories. The interest of having the community involved and ability to receive some of these funds or have that opportunity will come with the potential phase 2. So that's where we will let the community know. There's no way every committee member would be aware of all of the nonprofits that are out there in this community. So you open it up, give them an opportunity to apply, and then we would move into a potential, second approval and to allocate the resources. But even in that, this also gives you a second opportunity or more opportunity to meet either in your subcommittees or any type of group you want to have deeper and further conversations around whatever categories you all decide to move forward with.
This is Christy Robinson. I know that London said my name a few times, and I do think that this is a complicated way to collaborate. And I think we're all feeling that a little bit. And I know with the pandemic and Zoom, that has made things even more challenging. It seems that there's kind of a desire to have a little bit more dialogue before we move into hard numbers and maybe not the whole committee. I know we're not, it seems that not everyone on the committee is weighing in, which is another thing I worry about with this format is it's difficult for everyone to have an equal voice. And so that's why I've been pushing a bit to have a bit more collaborative instead of a competitive process and as we go. But I do worry about resetting completely as, we've done this work, through these multiple weeks. So I wonder if there's some sort of, it seems that maybe Joshua Canzono is saying that maybe when we move into phase 2, there could be more discussion there. And I think that's where my confusion is continuing to lie.
This is Melissa Wicklever. In the interest of time, could we call for the question and go ahead and vote so we can move forward if we're going to discuss some other things? There's a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. Can we call for the question?
Ms. Bailey, can you call for the question?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Let us, the motion for the motion that is at hand submitted by London. And exactly what was that, London, to reset?
Yes, ma'am. There was a motion to reset this committee.
Okay. So we'll have a roll call vote.
Okay. Claudette Bailey?
No.
Kenneth Pettigrew?
Nay.
Greg Byer, he's not here. Kanika Brown?
I'm gonna say yes and no at the same time. I think there's something that we just have to get worked out. If we can work some things out, I think that'd be great.
Okay, Dr. Josh Canzona?
No.
Sam Hickerson?
No.
Damon Davenport?
Respectfully oppose the motion.
Okay. Dr. Militia Witt-Glover?
No.
London McKinney?
Yes.
Debbie Hunter?
No.
I don't believe Francis Peralta is present. Rennie Pitt?
No.
Quamika Shavers?
Respectfully, no.
Charlene Simmons? Christy Robinson?
Respectfully, no.
Okay, and Kiana Terry, which I don't believe she's present. All right, so
The motion failed. Okay. Okay, I just said, so the motion failed.
So may I represent my motion at this time, please? So
Okay.
I would like to make a motion that we accept all 5 categories that were proposed on the proposed slide where the dollar amounts are beside it. Please.
I'll second
Hey,
that.
are you suggesting that the dollar amounts beside it should be accepted now, or just include your category, the 5 categories?
No, sir. No, sir. Just include the categories, please.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me just restate the categories. The categories are grants for social justice, anti-poverty initiatives. The second one is long-term anti-poverty social justice strategies. The third is broadband internet access, expansion and training. The fourth is heritage preservation and education. And then the fifth is mentorship and neighborhood capacity building. Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Yes. Oh.
Okay.
And if we could have some discussion here, I have a comment.
Chair Bailey, is that okay?
Yes.
Thank you so much. It seems to me that 2 of these categories are a little different. The one about broadband internet and the one having to do with long-term social justice planning. Neither have specific action items in the sense that we could do something tomorrow because we're ready. But they both seem a little bit closer to action items than the other 3 categories, which feel more to me like thematic categories for future grant proposals. I don't know if that distinction seems clear to anyone else, but again, two seem more like headers for projects where we could start making action items or someone could. And then the other 3 seem more like thematic categories where we would invite grant proposals from nonprofits or for-profits, I recall that conversation, and then discern how to allocate the money more specifically. I guess my thought as my goal would be if these are going to be presented to City Council, if that's our end game here, that they are presented with a clear description, a clear understanding as to what these categories mean and how they could be used.
I'm sorry, which ones are you in question of that you feel like they don't have something that can be done right away?
Right. So what I'm saying is that if you look at this list, there's a category for the long-term social justice anti-poverty strategies. And you'll remember that one of the items there was potentially hiring a new city staff person who would be thoughtful on these topics. And then there's another one, which was the broadband internet expansion, which again, there's very concrete efforts that could be made there that, we're going to expand it in these ways, in these areas. Those 2 seem a little bit different to me than the other 3, which seem like broader thematic categories where grant proposals would be invited and money would be further allocated to individual organizations. Now, there may be some slippage where you could say that of the other 2 as well, but I think they're categorically a little bit different. And so what I'm saying is that if we're going to present these 5 broad areas to City Council, that some explanation of what we mean by these 5 areas and what could happen next from our point of view might be helpful. So again, what could happen next for the 3 that are not currently highlighted could be that we invite grant proposals and score them somehow. What could happen next for the 2 that are highlighted is that we share some of the ideas that were presented. Broadband in this area, hiring a staff member in the city for this reason. So I hope that's clear.
Okay, so maybe that discussion needs to happen in the second phase. Maybe that discussion needs to happen in the second phase because we all pretty much, majority of us agreed in the beginning that approaching these 2 heavy tasks were not going to be something that 1 or 2 answers were going to suffice, that it was going to have to be a multifaceted approach.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that we understand that it is going to be a multifaceted approach, then you do have ideas that may be far from each other.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. And that also speaks to London as well, what she was saying, which I agree. What I'm saying is we give a few sentences to city council so they understand what you were just saying and what I was saying as well. In other words, what phase 2 might look like based on these categories from our point of view, so that city council has more than just these 5 thematic labels.
Hey, Joshua, I agree with you on the one about broadband and internet access, expansion and training. What if the question comes back, how does that help the community now? If this money is for right now, how does broadband, internet expansion and training, and then the hiring of a staff for the city, how does that help the citizens of Winston-Salem that are dealing with social justice and anti-poverty? How does that help?
Those are totally fair questions. And if they did come back with those questions, then it might be time to rethink those categories. But what I want is city council to understand our thinking now so that they could ask the questions they want to ask, which may be those.
Yeah. And if I can just interject, this is Debbie. As I recall, we were encouraged to select projects that were far-reaching, addressing more root cause systemic issues. And I think the 2 that are highlighted do exactly that. We may not know all of the specifics on how that would be executed, but they will certainly address long-term systemic issues in the community.
And I apologize. When I think about these, I have to think about my community now. I live in the heart where there's gun violence, where there's young kids not going to school. They're involved in crimes. So whether they have internet expansion and training and somebody being hired by the city, that does not meet their needs right now. That's not going to be long-term for them. They need something right now. And if we're talking about this money is going to be available once the city council votes on it, broadband internet expansion is far off. What do you do about the gun violence and crime now?
Well, I would suggest would a grassroots organization focused very particular way on your community, they could get some of the grant money thematically attached to the other 3 labels we have here, and they could perhaps start doing something right now. So it's not that all of the money is earmarked for those 2, that there's 3 other categories where some of that money might get into very particular community organizations.
But with all due respect, you did propose and say that you felt like these 2 categories that are highlighted would have ready to go opportunities to start up. And I mean this in the most respectful way, but I feel like I'm not being 100% authentic if I don't say this. It is too many people on this call that have no idea what the communities that we are supposed to be serving with this money need. And that's a major issue.
I agree. And I can't.
If you think that internet broadband, if you think these kids don't have access to internet in real life, you are even more so showcasing how much you have no idea what's going on in these communities.
Mm-hmm. And I agree. Well, I tell you, you can ask Sheriff Kimbrough. I've sat in a meeting with Sheriff Kimbrough, who has said to a committee, I got 40 kids that I'm trying to get some help with this new virtual learning, and I can't get any money. He had to go outside the state of North Carolina just to get some money because he needed help right then and there. Mm-hmm. And so you talk about supporting broadband internet expansion and training when he's having to seek money elsewhere, and we got money right here that could help him for something that he needs that's going to help our kids right now. He and Chief Thomas will tell you, if we don't help them on the front end, you're going to have more crime and gunshot trauma going on in this city if we don't find a way to help them help these kids now.
So could they ask for money from the other $600,000? If that's going to be money marked for specific grant proposals or specific requests, the other $600,000, they could request some of that money for that specific program you just mentioned. Now, I don't know the hearts and minds of other people on the call. I don't know their biographies. So I can't speak to what people know and do not know. I'm trying to look at what's in front of me on this slide, and I hope I articulated it in a way that was clear. And what I was suggesting is that it's then articulated to City Council in a way that they understand what we mean when we say phase 2, and then what would happen next. That's my only point for me.
Oh, Oh, well, if that's the case, and I believe that majority of us do, I know I do, and I know Broadband does, and I know that because I know who wrote the social justice strategies. Those are some protesters. I know who they are. So I know that they have theirs in detail. So I think other than two that I may have not seen myself, I think they do have pretty detailed, intricate plans of what their proposal is entailed. I know like I said, so I think that will be provided, and I think people already have that if that is your concern.
I mean, in a way, yes. I mean, my concern was that the city council, again, understands what phase two would involve. And what you're suggesting, I think, is that there already are some specific proposals that would come out of these funds for phase two. So we're already ready to hit the ground running for phase two. And that would be something that could be communicated to city council as well, that more suggestions are coming, which I think would be a good thing to communicate. But I defer to city staff who might have a better understanding of, in the committee chairs, who might have a better understanding of exactly the best way to communicate what we've just done or what we're about to do to the city council.
Well, can we request additional information to find out where in our city, where's the social justice and anti-poverty needs so that we can focus in those areas? That's information that we have never received. And then maybe we can have a better understanding, when it comes to allocating funds based on these categories, which ones stay and which one goes.
I'm sorry, but before that, can we vote on the 5 categories? I understand changing the, some individuals might want to change their pricing and things, but I know we had a second on that, and I want to see if we could finish the vote that was currently going on.
Okay. All right, so there was a motion. I believe there was a second to approve was there a second? I missed it.
Yes, honey.
Okay. For all 5 categories as seen on the screen here. There was discussion about 2 of the categories being more long-term strategies, and then the other 3 would be more right now, could provide resources to the community. Okay, so we'll go through the roll call. Claudette Bailey.
Aye.
Kenneth Pettigrew.
Aye.
Kanika Brown.
Aye.
Dr. Josh Canzona.
Aye.
Sam Hickerson.
Aye.
Damon Davenport.
Aye.
Melissa Witt Glover.
Aye.
London McKinney.
Abstain.
Debbie Hunter.
Respectfully, no.
Walter Rennie Pitt.
Aye.
Quamika Shavers.
Yes.
Christy Robinson.
Aye.
Okay, and then I don't think Kiana Terry is here.
The motion has been approved.
Okay, so the committee has voted to potentially propose these categories to City Council, 2 long-term strategies, and then 3 categories where people can submit applications to receive those funds within those categories. I think the second step would be from the information you all have already submitted, making sure that these are well defined. And then the next piece, which you all can quickly decide today if you would like, is how much funding for each category. So based on the results, as I mentioned before, the categories really are listed in priority order based on the survey. So we can, have more for the grants, which would be 300,000, anti-poverty strategies, I think this depends if we are just looking at a potential consultant to then review the strategies and Dr. Melissa Witt-Glover, if you're there and want to kind of weigh in, you and Ken, on your thoughts about this, because if it's just a consultant up front to look at strategies and then create recommendations from that, then that amount could be reduced to 30 to 50,000. And then it would require the council then to review those recommendations and say, okay, do we need a actual staff person for ongoing social justice coordination, or do we need X, Y, and Z, whatever the consultant would come back with? Or is this, or do we want to make sure there's money for food insecurities built into this? So if you two could kind of weigh in, that would be great.
This is Melissa. I'll weigh in with an apology that I've had to leave and start school pickup, so I'm in my car. I think that when we talked about our proposal, we really felt that the two ideas would go together, and so I'm not sure that we would want to separate those. And I don't know, Mr. Pettigrew, if you want to weigh in as well.
Yeah, I think our thinking in bringing them together is that they made more sense as a complementary pair, because the reality of hiring a staff person who would focus on issues of diversity, inclusion, how resources are allocated, being significantly more present to the community voice in certain kinds of ways is the intention around first hiring the consultant and deciding what those steps would be, because the issue at hand is that we have $1 million here, but if a consultant is able to do work around how the resources the city currently has are being allocated and used, that will free up additional resources that could be well invested into communities and organizations who are doing work that on issues that require immediate resources and addressing. I know it's a process, but the process is designed to pay off in longer term direct impact kind of ways. So the two pieces, in my opinion, should not be separated.
Okay, right. I think we're thinking this is one category, just looking at the dollar amount. Is that reasonable? Is it something that can go lower or higher? I mean, is it, so just trying to figure out the budget. So is the immediate goal for this category to hire a consultant, or is the immediate goal for food?
No.
Ken?
I think the immediate goal, of course, yes, would be for there to be a bid to hire a consultant, but additionally for there to be additional money for training and community outreach around the things that the consultant finds, or that we need to do based on what the consultant reports back. So for me, looking at that category, I would say roughly probably $150,000 as an initial investment would be sufficient.
Okay, excellent. Okay, which then, so do we want to add broadband internet committee? I know you originally requested 400,000. This would have to be done more so in a smaller pilot, and then, other resources would potentially duplicate a success program for this internet expansion. So do we want to add 250 to this, since we reduced the previous category by 50? Is everyone okay with that?
Can the heritage?
That sounds good.
Okay. Heritage preservation, Ms. Shavers, were you going to weigh in on that?
Yes, may we have 50 more too, please?
It would have to come from somewhere else.
So we already agreed for 300,000 for social grants and initiatives. We already agreed on that?
No, and we haven't agreed collectively as a committee. The thought was to kind of start, that was like the number one priority based on the survey.
May I ask for another 50?
You know, I feel like this goes back to the conversation we were just having a moment ago. Some were saying that there was a need for immediate investment into communities, into needs felt by individual communities, which could be concerning food, which concerning any number of things. And so now the question is, if we're going to move $50,000 around, do you prefer it to be allocated to a category for anti-poverty initiatives, or do you prefer it to be in the category for heritage preservation and education? And that's a very good question. I don't have the answer to it. I just want to be clear about what's being asked.
The social justice grant is about food preservation and also hiring someone in the jail to be a social justice coordinator to, you know, I know what the what it's about. Like I said, I know who presented that. Okay. And I would like to say this, and this is with all due respect, other than the broadband, no offense, all of them are equally important because the broadband is being addressed by the school board. That I do know.
The broadband is currently being addressed as far as sending out hotspots to people that are doing, kids that are doing virtual learning now, but it's not the long-term solution to invest in city commodity is not being addressed currently. It's being addressed until virtual learning is done, which means it's just happening now. And my understanding of the committee was that we were trying to make long-term solutions, not like looking at solving longer-term equity issues.
That's correct, Christy.
And while I understand that, how long are you going to be able to pay for these different families to have broadband access? You know, school is a, 18-year ride, at least from K to 12. So how long is that going to run out before individuals either can't afford it, as many of them can't now, or just choosing not to pay for it? Because some of them are just making a choice not to pay for that.
This is Debbie Hunter. I understood from our proposal that that there was a segment of the community that did not even have access because the cables weren't even run for broadband. And so I thought part of our proposal was to begin to fund the infrastructure to support the use of broadband.
That's correct, Debbie. Right now, there are certain areas of Winston-Salem, as I spoke about at the last meeting, due to redlining that don't even have cable laid. So I liken it to, there's places of Winston-Salem that I indicated in a previous map that don't have like roads to their house, and not that we're paying to repave the roads every single year like we would be paying for internet access. What this proposal says is that we would propose to lay the cable, which is expensive and time intensive. And that's what we would use that money for, so that people would be able to have access that wanted to be able to access internet.
I hear you. I just want two things to be known and understood. It is the role of the state to provide access to broadband for student learning. It is the constitutional right that the state is responsible of making sure that that's happened. Right now, we're in a pandemic and things were just kind of like all over the place, and people are trying to figure out how to do this as best as possible. So I just want those things to be understood. It's not that I don't agree with you. I mean, I love education. I voted for the proposal, and I actually put it up as a high ranking. Education all the way, love it. But I do feel like with such a small amount of money and what we're up against, is that a bigger of the priorities, understanding that that's also somebody else's responsibility that they are currently addressing. Because I, like you, because I know you said you went to the school board and you had some connections there, so do I, because I helped many of them get elected. So I talked to them as well too, to find out, hey, what are these issues? How are you addressing these issues? How are to be addressed during a pandemic? So being that I know somebody else on the back end, or whether the front end is working on it too, why should we give this money to them? Why should we allocate money to that when it's already being worked on by another entity? But it made the cut, so we really can move on. That's just my commentary. You know what I mean?
I think somebody's mic is not muted. Well, thank you, Ms. Shavers, for those comments. I thoroughly read this committee's proposal and sat in on their subcommittees. So one thing I would just add to that, a couple of things, is that they were looking at not only access for the school children, but just for the families as a whole in their household to be able to have access to the internet and technology and high-speed broadband internet, to be exact, as more of an equity issue and access. And so the city, which I don't believe the state would be involved in, already has some infrastructure through their recreation centers. And so this proposal would look to expand that so that kids wouldn't have to go to a rec center just to get the Wi-Fi. And I know there are some hotspots now because of the virtual learning, but to be able to be in their homes and be able to access it. So I know there are concerns about the next step. Well, how do you sustain this? How do people continue to pay it? And those are very valid questions, but establishing the infrastructure so they can at least access it, I think is applaudable in terms of the potential effort of that. And you see the training piece of it is also included in that proposal. And so that's where some nonprofits could actually apply that can offer training. I know Winston-Net does it. I believe someone said Imprints might offer some kind of training on technology as well. So I just wanted to throw that in. All right, so we've got a potential breakdown of the budget as is. I mean, I know there's not enough, obviously, even that category, like I said, ideally they wanted 400,000, so they're down to 250. I know heritage preservation and education, it was more than, I know it was maybe 300, close to 300, maybe 290. So it's 200. So each of the categories did not get what their ideal request is, but there's something for everyone, it's for every category. And then we can discuss phase 2 at a later time. But what we need to do, if someone wants to make a motion on these categories with this breakdown of budget being this committee's recommendation to council for phase 1, and then looking to phase 2, which would be the immediate getting the resources out to the community through an RFP, which would be the ones that are in white would meet immediate needs. And then the 2 in yellow would be more the long-term strategies on addressing social justice and anti-poverty. So is there someone want to make a motion on improving this breakdown, or if there's more discussion?
I'll make the motion to approve it just as you described, the breakdown as it is, along with the explanation you just provided for City Council.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Quick roll call votes. Claudette Bailey.
Aye.
Kenneth Pettigrew.
Nay.
Greg Byer. He's not here. Kanika Brown. Josh Kenzona.
Aye.
Sam Hickerson.
Aye.
Damon Davenport.
Aye.
Melissa Witt Glover.
Nay.
London McKinney.
No.
Debbie Hunter.
No.
Francis Peralta. Walt Torini Pitt.
No.
Quamika Shavers.
I'm sorry. Are we voting on to send it like it is with the money? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, this potential breakdown, and after, if this does not pass, you can, state what the breakdown will be, or we can table this, the budget piece of it. But right now, what's presented on your screen, would you be in favor of this breakdown?
Gosh, Lee, I'm so sorry. Gosh, Lee. So if I say yes, this is the money figures that we're going to present to City Council. So I'm sorry. I'm going to have to say no respectfully. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. Is Charlene Simmons? Christy Robinson?
No.
Okay, I think that's it. Did somebody tally that? Chair Bailey?
Patrice, I've got 4 yeas and 7 noes.
Okay.
Somebody,
so that,
I don't think somebody voted.
Okay, so the motion failed.
okay. So does anybody want to propose something different?
I propose that we table this for now.
Okay. All right, so the proposal is to table the breakdown of the budget for now.
Second.
Okay. I have to go back through this list again. All right. So this is a vote to just table the breakdown of the budget. Claudette Bailey.
Aye.
Ken Pettigrew.
Aye.
Kanika Brown. Josh Kenzona.
Yes.
Sam Hickerson.
Yes.
Damon Davenport.
Aye.
Melissa Witt Glover.
Aye.
London McKinney.
Aye.
Debbie Hunter.
Aye.
Randy Pitt.
Aye.
Quamika Shavers.
Aye.
Charlene Simmons. And Christy Robinson.
Aye.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we have a plan. We've got 5 categories the committee has approved. And then the budget discussion we will do at a separate meeting. This officially, like I said, ends our scheduled meeting. What we'll have to do is look at October. I believe most of the meeting dates are taken from our normal Thursday at 2 o'clock. But I may either have to send out some calendar requests or some potential dates and see when the majority can meet again. So what I'll definitely try to do is schedule one more meeting for us to reconvene. If there's something you all want to send out and want to provide feedback, I can definitely do that. I can definitely also send out another maybe survey about how you all want to break down the budget. Might be convenient before our next meeting, so we don't have to go through a lot of discussion, and we would have the results at that time.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Tony, may I ask a question? I know we have something with the public coming up, but I'm not 100% sure. Are we going to talk to the, I know time is not on our hands. I know. But are we going to be able to talk to the public at any given time about even what we're strategizing to do just prior to it being submitted to city council, who will make the, who will make the end decision? Because I think that that's like the best too, that we talk to the community before we step out here and really think that we doing what's best for people that very often on this call we all haven't talked to. Because I feel like people's decisions and people's ideas would be different if they actually talk to the constituents that we claim and we trying to help.
Ms. Shavers, that is an excellent point. In the original plan, we did have a scheduled public input session that would have been today, actually. So because of the timing and, there being some concerns, that was just tabled for now. Once we reconvene, maybe at our next meeting, I think we should discuss that possibility of doing some kind of public input session. So that can definitely happen before this list of categories goes to council, or once this list is approved by council, we could then second step do a public awareness piece of the availability of the grant funds, so the public is aware, and then do after applications and things are reviewed, do maybe one last kind of public input on your recommendations for specific projects. So,
yes,
yes,
ma'am. So I hope it can happen before we send it to city council. And the only reason why I say that, even though I know city council can have a meeting too prior to their voting, is that I think it would be more strategic if the public was able to comb through it before we send it to city council. So then when it gets to city council too, they can also have an idea of what constituents are really in need of.
Okay.
Because I really feel like that's probably what we should have did first before we even came up with these ideas, but
Okay.
We didn't want to reset.
Okay, I think that's a great suggestion, and we can definitely look to setting a date, which would have to be mid-October, which will also mean we would need to meet soon to finalize the breakdown of this budget, and then offer a public input where people can just weigh in to the categories. Okay. Chairman Bailey, that ends this portion of the agenda. And so I think we've kind of reviewed the next steps, which would be, I will send out the list of categories and then allow committee members to decide on the budgets for each of those. And it has to total up to $1 million. So, and then I'll set the next meeting.
If there's no other business, the meeting is hereby adjourned. Stay safe.